There we go. And we are live. Happy Tuesday, everyone. Hi. I'm Dr. Sarah Mara with Lifestream Health Center and coming to you live from my office in Bowie, Maryland, where we are making pain management care more caring, accessible, patient centric, and evidence based. Today, I have a special guest, Dr. Rashmi Schramm, who is a family medicine doctor and also a meditation coach. And I'm so excited to have her here because, in fact, she's been my meditation coach and I have done some meditating with her. And I'm just glad that she can share with us all the wonderful things she knows. Thanks. Hi, Rashmi.
It is so wonderful to be here with you, Sarah. Thank you so much.
Great. Yeah. So we're here to kind of educate the public, educate our patients about the intersection of chronic pain and general health and how we can live healthier lives. And so I'm really excited that you can help us learn about mindfulness and maybe also touch on breath work and why these are tools that might actually help for chronic pain.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to kind of get us started, if you don't mind, just with a definition of mindfulness, even, because sometimes that can get lost in the fray. And so mindfulness is actually really simple. It is the awareness that arises when we are paying attention to this present moment without judgment and with curiosity. And so just giving ourselves permission to enter whatever is here is generally considered to be mindfulness. Now, meditation is also very simple and has a lot of connotations, but meditation is just simply moving from activity into stillness. And it is generally thought of as the fastest way to build up that mindfulness muscle.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. So mindfulness is paying attention to the present moment without judgment. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. And if we think about, how 3 and 4 and 5-year-olds are, like no one taught them to be mindful or to be in the present moment. They're already in the present moment, and so long as their basic needs are met, their essential nature is one of expansion, curiosity, joy, all of those things. And there's generally no judgment. So I say that to say, it's not like we have to learn how to be mindful. We actually were born already being mindful beings. We just forgot that that's who we were. So it's just a matter of like taking away some of the layers of stress that build up over time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say, like, as a mother of a child, I have an elementary school kid and a middle school kid. And even it starts young, though. I would say even my elementary school kid is already like judging situations. Oh, this is bad. Can we talk about maybe judgment or something? Because I think that is such a powerful thing to like be able to step back and question certain, when certain events happen in life, to be able to step back and just not attach a ton of meaning or judgment to them.
Ooh, yeah, this is a juicy one, right? Because judgment is like not black or white. It's not like it's all bad and it's not all good, right? And so in so many situations in our lives, we have to judge certain situations, certain interactions, certain choices. We do have to use our judgment, right? That's sort of that higher capacity that we have. And it's when we end up using that as a blanket over all the things in our lives, whether it's about how somebody else may be showing up, how actually the most judgmental things we can do or say is generally about ourselves. And so it can be one of these really important tools as we move through life with skill, but then it can also have this other edge of not giving us the capacity for awareness. If we're constantly already guessing and knowing what's here, then well, we can predict the future, and the past is the future and nothing will change.
Yeah. How boring.
Yeah. What a boring way.
What a boring way to be. Yeah.
But what's interesting is the brain actually really likes boring. The brain is constantly trying to go into kind of this automatic way of being, and it's not good or bad. It just is. And
Mm-hmm.
it is enormously helpful for us, right? So that's why we can talk on the phone or listen to a podcast when we're driving. There are so many different things that we're doing on autopilot that are very, very helpful for us. But it's when we might be missing, a kid's play, a kid's recital, or just having a conversation with our partner when they're trying to have a conversation with us, or a friend when they are just trying to make a connection. If we're no longer in this present moment, if we're worried about the future, if we're ruminating about a conversation that we had half an hour ago, we're going to miss those ordinary moments. And when we miss those, they never come back.
Yeah, that's super interesting. That's super interesting. Mindfulness. So we're gonna work on paying attention to the present moment without judgment.
Yeah. And, we don't have to be mindful all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly not. But when we notice that we are not in this present moment, if we can just say, hey, you know what, I'm going to show up here and I'm just going to see what's here. And so bringing in some curiosity.
Yeah, bringing in some curiosity. Very good. And so you work with people to coach them. You have some mindfulness programs. Tell me about um, how you teach some of the things that you do.
For sure. And so one thing to remember is most people are in different stages of this. And what's really fascinating is there's studies that show that we're probably at an all-time high for interest in meditation and in mindfulness
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
than ever before. Certainly, the pandemic kind of streamlined some of the interest as well. And then, if you think about the number of apps that there are and the number of programs,
Yeah.
it is an enormously growing area of interest for most people. And
Yeah.
somewhere around 30-40% of adults in the US say they've tried meditation or at least tried to meditate at some point, which again is really a fascinating thing to think about.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I do is I offer just kind of let me meet you where you are, kind of one-on-one private coaching, which, we can tailor to anything. And most of the time, almost everybody that comes in, whether it's, and then in the group program, it's always still let me meet you where you are, but it's sort of a little bit more of a set agenda where we can kind of move through certain yogic concepts, certain mindfulness concepts, certain ways of considering emotional well-being. So things that we might not have been trained on or had any exposure to
Yeah.
as physicians, or really just anyone. Emotional health and well-being is just like, what is that? So in that way, it's sort of moving from this sense of feeling like we might be stuck or not really headed where we want to go to getting there with more
Mm-hmm.
ease. And so the question always becomes, can we give ourselves permission to have a little bit more ease? Can we give ourselves permission to have a little bit more flow? And what might that look like?
Yeah. Very cool. And it's going to be different for everybody, it sounds like.
It's going to be different for everybody, but there is, there's a very old poem by Hafez, who is a Sufi poet, and he says this, and I think it still stands true for us right now, which is, he says, when all your desires are distilled, you will cast just 2 votes.
Okay.
To be happy and to love more. It's usually pretty true, especially if we talk to people at the end of their lives.
Yes. Yes. Those are the things we really want.
Yeah. Yeah.
And kind of how do we get there? I think maybe we think we know, but how do we and
yeah, how do we, right? Because what we put our attention on will always grow. And so even just saying, how can I give myself ease? Like that's a question most of us have probably never asked ourselves. And it was not really something that was discussed during medical training, and I think, and I coach really high achieving women in all different areas, whether they're in medicine or not. And they definitely were not given permission or it wasn't in that conditioned response of, is there space for flow? Is there space for self-care? Is there space for not feeling like you're running on this treadmill all the time?
well, and yeah, there's like a fine point there of like, okay, how to give more ease. And a lot of us maybe don't always ask ourselves that question. But it's not like, well, it's going to be by doing the easiest thing, right? It's ease, you know, it's not the shortcut to everything.
I love this. Oh my gosh, this is such an important point you just made. So important. So one of the big things that I think you're talking about too, and I see it all the time, are these hacks, right? Like
Mhm.
it's like
Yes.
every hack in the world. It's like, and so it's fine. Maybe there's a hack here or two, here or
Yeah.
there, but ultimately that's not what we're talking about when we say ease. We're talking about can we actually allow ourselves to actually have white space? Can we
Mhm.
allow ourselves to have rest when we feel the need to rest? Which actually helps us be more productive and more focused in the long run. But
Yes.
it's if we don't keep that long sort of game in mind, we'll burn out. I mean, there's so much burnout. And so that's really what I mean by ease. And I'm really glad you brought
Yes.
that up.
Yeah. So not just like, oh, let me, you know, that sounds hard. Let me not do it. Right. Like life's not supposed to be easy. Let me go do this hard thing all the time. No. Um,
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And that can actually be a connotation with the meditation and mindfulness world, which is actually not true at all, because the whole idea behind developing awareness is developing awareness of attachments, right? So
mhm,
we can create an intention and a result that we want in life,
mhm,
and we can become very attached to that result, which doesn't really help us as we're moving through to that result. It can cause a lot of turbulence for us. So within the kind of that mindfulness realm, the idea really is, yes, please, we are constantly growing, we are constantly evolving. And where is that next baseline for you? Where's the next baseline for you? There's no upper limit. And so what is it that you're creating? What is
mhm,
it? And you get really clear about that, right? And then you know the results that you'd like to have. And ultimately, being mindful is having the awareness, am I attached to this result? If so, let me toss the attachment to this result and focus on the process to getting me there, and letting go of the stories that I'm creating every time I hit a road bump,
mhm,
because we're going to all hit road bumps. Life is messy. Life is not supposed to be rainbows
mhm.
and unicorns. It is messy. It's how can we move through it more skillfully? That would actually be kind of the better way to look at that.
And why am I not attached to the result? I mean, what about the idea that the result is motivating if it's moving toward a positive thing, right? Like that's my motivation. I want to achieve blah blah blah. If it's a work goal or a, you know, a fitness or a health goal.
Yeah. So let me give you an example. I think examples are really helpful. So
Mhm,
let's say you decide you're going to build on another wing of your already beautiful big practice. And so you
mhm,
put your own cash into it, and you have this whole vision for this space that you're building onto, right? And
mhm,
you want to have it done in 6 months, and you've got the contractors lined up, you've got, all the things lined up for, I need to get this and this done, and I need to have it open in 6 months so that
mhm.
I can make X revenue and also provide X amount of service to my clients, to my patients.
Repay my loans.
And
Yeah.
yeah, so you know what you want, right?
Mhm,
And that's a great thing, because then there's a lot of clarity. Now,
mhm.
what tends to happen is things usually don't go the way that we want. Certainly not in construction, right? So that's an
Sure.
easy one to pick, to go that it ain't going to go our way.
Yeah.
And so like a contractor might not show up. The contractor might do the wrong thing. We have to wait for some permit for like 3 weeks. And all these dudes are just sitting around doing nothing because they need to have
Yeah.
a permit for the next thing. And what starts to happen then is the mind can create a story of, I am never going to get there in 6 months. And it must be because I was never meant to get there. This was a terrible idea. And what was
Mhm,
I thinking? How dare I be thinking that? Because I'm never going to hit it in 6 months' time,
mhm.
so on and so forth. And there's all these different stories that could be created. And I knew I shouldn't have chosen this contractor. Like it starts to be a lot of double guessing,
Yeah.
going back and all of this. And that's really how attachment to the result shows up. That's really how that
Okay.
shows up. So let's say we create the result. We know what we want it to look like. We know why we want it to be there. And
Mhm,
yet we start to have these bumps in the road. When we notice the story that it's making, because it has awareness, right? When you notice, oh, okay, well, this contractor didn't show up. I'm making up a story about how I knew I shouldn't have hired him and I hired him anyway, and yada, yada, yada.
Mm-hmm.
Not really. The contractor didn't show up. Let me do the next 4 things that I know what to do. And
Mm-hmm.
if that has gone south, let me move on to the next thing. Let me move on to the next thing. Let me move on to the next thing. When there is a delay in the permit, let me see, do I need to go down to the county office and plea for something? Maybe. Actually, I've done that personally, right? So maybe not. I don't know. But what does that give you? That gives you more access to action that's filled with intention and less turbulence from the mind as things kind of move along.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean you don't get there. You will definitely get there.
Yeah, but releasing the attachment is not. I mean, I guess maybe is the result of that maybe not putting excessive meaning on those sidetrack things that happen.
That and it also gives you the space to focus on the process.
Okay.
Because it's really everything that we get any result from is always from a process, and it's always from action.
Yeah. Well, and here's the other thing that I see in my practice, and this is challenging for our patients, right? So I see a lot of patients who have work injuries, or they may have had a car accident, and then I think then a person we're helping a person who's had a big setback, right? And the life or the situation that they've envisioned and what they're experiencing are two different things.
For sure.
And
For sure.
very many times it's through no fault of their own. Um, and it really puts people in a tough space, physically, mentally, emotionally. And we just see that, kind of greater, emotional toll that it takes on people. And I think it has to do with this. It does have to do with judgment, I think, and people's idea of, how it's supposed to be.
Yeah, for sure. And that is a really challenging thing, right? And thank goodness you are doing the work that you do because it is so needed. So, what I'm understanding or taking away from it is so many of your patients have experienced trauma of one sort or another. It could be physical trauma, which is always involved in mental and emotional trauma. Like you can't just have physical trauma without mental and emotional trauma.
Mm-hmm.
They're all one and the same. And sometimes we can have just emotional trauma that can show up in the body as well. But in
Yeah.
any case, there are so many valid emotions that come along with that, things like anger, frustration, disbelief, sadness, grief, right? Like all of those things.
Right.
And none of us were really trained, or maybe we were like literally trained the opposite way of
Mm-hmm.
actually turning towards some of those emotions that feel very constrictive.
Yeah.
And that's also a mindful way of moving through life, because when we can actually give those emotions a little bit of space, just a little bit of space, and acknowledge them, they're really almost always just coming to go. There's no such thing as a permanent emotion. And it may take quite a long time, right? Because grief, especially grief over the loss of a life that they were planning, if it was physical trauma, however that is, if that is no longer possible, um, grief takes time. Grief takes time. And so we're in this like hack mentality where we're like, oh,
Yes.
I'm gonna work through this. I'm gonna pretend it didn't happen, right? Like, I mean, I take care of patients all the time where there'll be a big trauma in their lives, and one of the tendencies, so literally like a death in the family, will be, I'm just gonna pretend it didn't happen, right? And so these things can take their toll on us over time because what we resist persists.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the case of the patients that are having all of this emotional turmoil of 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 mindfully giving some amount of permission for those emotions to be there as they move through
Yes.
that response, however that looks for them. And I think that's where the work that you do is so important.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to introduce some of these concepts. It's a lot to unpack in a visit with a patient. So certainly to have some conversations and have some info and some paths that people can look down if it feels natural or something that might be helpful to them.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I think I do want to introduce, continue to introduce patients to, concepts of mindfulness and meditation. We've even done in the practice a short online group meditation class that was really well received, and I probably need to do it again. Um, because we really, had some folks that really enjoyed it. And I think one of the things that I've learned from you is kind of that all meditation experiences are valid, and maybe we'll talk about that a little bit. But that was just one thing that comes to mind that I would share. When we had this group meditation, and I had a couple folks where we did it online, and then immediately the questions, well, I think I fell asleep. I'm not sure if I did it right, and that we kind of discussed that if you're making an effort to meditate, that really all meditation experiences are valid.
That's so perfect. Yeah. And that's it exactly. Because there is kind of this myth that becomes associated with a meditation session or a meditation practice that you have to feel a certain way. You have to feel really chill. You have to feel really relaxed. You have to feel blissful. And you have to come out of it with like just a big smile on your face and maybe a halo around, like all of that. And it's not to say that can't happen. I think you and I have had plenty of sessions where that does happen, but that isn't what we're going after. All of the benefits that we look at for meditation, certainly within the context of this conversation, decreasing inflammation, decreasing the effects of chronic daily stress, which can come from having a chronic pain syndrome of any sort. All of those things, it's moving us into more of a healing space, regardless of whether we felt agitated and had a lot of thoughts, whether we fell asleep, whether we were following the guidance, or whether we felt blissful. All of those things, like you said, are all valid experiences. And what really counts is if you said, I'm going to meditate for 5 minutes, that you sat there and followed through with the meditation for 5 minutes. And ultimately, it is a practice in mindfulness, which means if we say that meditation sucked, that one was great, well, we're judging it. Is it mindfulness, not judgment?
Yes.
So what we really just need to do instead is just be open and curious and see what shows up.
Yes. And mindfulness being paying attention to that present moment without judgment, and then meditation being just a formal practice of mindfulness, right?
Yeah.
And I'd love it if maybe you'd touch on like those benefits of meditation for a minute, like, because for our folks that are kind of hearing all this and like, okay, this is interesting. I would love to be able to share a little bit of that. I know you're pretty well versed in those things. And
yeah, I think a really great way to look at some of the benefits that we get from a meditation practice can be in just the context of most of us, most of the time, are living in some amount of chronic daily stress, right? So this sort of epidemic of chronic daily stress where there is too much to do, not enough time, like something like that, some context like that. And what happens is we can stay in these low levels of the fight or flight response. We can stay in these low levels of inflammation that are chronic day in, day out, day in, day out. And when we do that, we know that a whole host of different things start to happen because, the sympathetic response is amazing. It has saved our ancestors' lives. It saved our lives. So it isn't like, oh, this is just a terrible thing. No, but over time, it was never evolutionarily designed for us to live in it. We were designed to live mostly in that parasympathetic nervous system, as we can see from all of our pets. They are always in that system. So when we stay in that sympathetic go, 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 a host of things happen, right? And it would make sense. So let's say I was driving down the street and a car was, swerving into my lane. Well, my gosh, let's kick it in to high gear, right? And what that means is, the pupils get dilated, my heart rate increases, I take these short, shallow breaths, and this is really not a time for me to worry about digestion. This is not a time for me to worry about reproduction. This is not a time for me to even worry about my immune system. So blood gets diverted from all of those areas into the large skeletal muscles. The adrenal glands are pumping out cortisol because I might need to run. I might need to, like, my car might roll over and I might have to get out and run. So there are all these different things, right? So yes, it's meant to save our lives in a matter of, 120 seconds. But when we live in it every single day, if we're late showing up for work and we start, and the same thing happens, if we open an email and the heart rate goes up and, like those same kinds of events continue on and on and on. And let's say over the course of 12, 13, 14 hours, we've probably spent 6 or 7 hours somewhere in that, taking these short, shallow breaths, kind of not even noticing how kind of inflamed we're really making the body, because the body has no idea whether we're just thinking something or if there's an actual threat. So that's kind of the baseline scenario. What happens there, right? Especially if there's a complexity of a chronic illness, a complexity of chronic pain, is that staying in that sympathetic response can perpetuate and worsen the pain, because is increasing the inflammation. So a practice like meditation, mindfulness, for example, immediately. So you don't have to be a seasoned yogi. You don't have to know how to meditate, but almost always in studies over and over again, just within the first 5 minutes, what we'll see is we'll see a shift into that parasympathetic rest and restore response. And that, you can imagine, is the exact opposite of what we just talked about. So we're not trying to slow down our breath. The breath is already slowing down. We're not trying to slow down the heart rate. It's already slowing down. The blood pressure is dropping. We're not trying to make it do so, right? And the blood that was shunted away from the immune system, that was shunted away from the digestive tract, that was really relocated from the reproductive organs, then start to repopulate that. And what that looks like is pretty immediately we can start to see some benefits. We can start to see drops in cortisol levels, not that far out into the future. We also start to see the brain have different ways of actually deciding where it wants to send blood. So when we're in a sympathetic response, we stay in our reptilian brain, which is really sort of that, amygdala hypothalamus, where we have to be in survival mode. Now, when we go into this sort of rest and restore response, we can actually very quickly see a change in where the blood flow goes in the brain. And so we start to see different areas of blood flow within the prefrontal cortex. And then over time, the brain actually looks completely different. So the brain of someone who's spent, 10,000 hours in meditation over their lifetime doesn't even resemble anything like sort of the lay person's does. So that means that their prefrontal cortex, which is where we have access to higher levels of discernment, creativity, and the capability of emotional intelligence, regardless of the circumstances, all of those things start to become more and more resilient. And so that actually, as a being, mind, body being, we actually become more resilient, which means we can actually not just stay calm during chaos, but also make highly creative decisions regardless of what the circumstances are. And within the body itself, because there is less inflammation, we also start to see more healing as well. A lot of times we discount self-healing and just homeostasis, right? So this dynamic non-change in the midst of constant change. And when we can anytime we can bring the body and the mind into homeostasis, we are promoting that healing response. And so those are just some of, I could talk about the benefits for probably a week. I don't know that you have. Okay. But that's kind of the overview of what brought me to meditation, for example.
I have one more example thought too about the benefits. I seem to recall a discussion around the benefits where maybe at some point some levels of serotonin and norepinephrine were measured, and that there are measurable increases in those, and those are like the feel-good chemicals in the brain. And my recollection of the statistic that you had given us was that it was pretty similar to a dose-response relationship, a pretty similar amount of change to what you might get from taking a pill, what you might get from taking like a pill every day.
For sure. And in fact, they actually did publish that study in, I think it was JAMA Psychology, and it ended up being the same day as this last election result day. So it was totally drowned out in the news. But yes, thank you so much for bringing up the neurotransmitters. So what they have shown over and over again, and this is not over a very long period of time, within 3 weeks, someone who starts to meditate consistently and keeps up with that practice, so about 11 hours or so, there is an endogenous increase. So not coming from the outside, but the mind body system itself can actually produce 35 to 40% more serotonin, which is that feel-good hormone, more DHEA, more norepinephrine. And those are what we talk about, like when we've got a pill that's an SSRI or an SNRI, for example. What's really astounding that a pill really can't do is that a long-standing meditation practice can boost dopamine levels, because we're constantly looking for those dopamine kind of hits, by up to 60%, which makes it so much more powerful as a way to change our habits with awareness and with intention. So thank you for bringing that up.
Got it. And so So if I have a regular meditation practice, I could actually increase my dopamine level by 60%.
You will increase your dopamine levels by 60%. Yeah, yeah, your baseline levels, absolutely.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah, and it never went away. I mean, they studied those people for a long, long time. And so the study that was published very recently, within this last year, showed that they compared a regular meditation practice to one of the common SSRIs, also known as Lexapro or escitalopram, and the results were exactly the same.
Wow.
Over a 8-week period.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty astounding.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, could you introduce us a little bit to what a brief meditation practice might be like? I had asked Rashmi before this if that would be something she'd be willing to do. Is just take a couple minutes and kind of have us all be mindful, pay attention to the present moment, and so that we could experience it. Because depending on our viewers, they may not have ever considered what a meditation practice might look like and how to do this.
Let's do it. I'd love that. So first rule is get yourself really comfortable. If you're driving, obviously don't close your eyes, but if you're able to and you're comfy, generally we ask that you can sit up in a bit of a tall, maybe a dignified position. Having backrest is perfect. And I generally like to close my eyes. If that feels comfortable for you, go ahead and close your eyes. If that doesn't feel comfortable for you, it's not a problem. Maybe just have a soft downward gaze. And if your legs are crossed, just kind of uncross them just for a moment, and then just place your hands gently on your lap. And once your eyes are either closed or with your downward gaze, let's just take a couple of big deep breaths. And when you exhale, just let out a big audible sigh a couple of times. And with each exhalation, just letting go of what's not serving you right now, just letting it go. Just giving yourself permission to just be right here, even though there are a lot of competing priorities. The mind may be offering a lot of thoughts, maybe even agitation, acknowledging it. And just giving yourself permission to be curious and present and open just for the next few minutes. As you do that, notice if it's possible to drop the shoulders away from the ears just a bit. Is it possible to relax the jaw? From this place, can you simply begin to notice the breath? Not trying to alter it in any way, just noticing the breath. And when you notice that your mind has wandered, you've done nothing wrong. Just gently returning back to the breath. Next, I want you to repeat the following phrase. It's a fill in the blank phrase. I want you to silently repeat, I am, and then your first name and your last name. So I would say, I am Rashmi Schramm. And now dropping the last name, I want you to silently repeat, I am, and just your first name. Now dropping the name all together and just softly and silently repeating, I am, I am. just gently and effortlessly, not trying to force or control it. I am. Now let's just switch to the Sanskrit vibration of I am. Aham. Aham. Just silently repeating it. Still keeping the eyes closed, just gently releasing the mantra aham and just resting here. Now putting your attention at the level of your heart, let's ask ourselves, what am I grateful for? What are the many blessings in my life? Just allowing any answers to arise, any sensations. Just bringing in a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude for yourself, gratitude for creating the space in your busy life. Gratitude for the breath. I want you to silently repeat these 4 intentions as I say them. Just silently drop them into your being. These 4 intentions are joyful, energetic, vibrant body. Loving, compassionate heart. Reflective, alert, peaceful mind. And lightness of being. Now just taking a few deeper breaths, bringing your attention back to the body, back to the room, and giving yourself permission to take a moment if you need it. And when you're ready, just softly opening the eyes, only when you're ready. So it can be really simple.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I did it too. It was good.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I think that's really what I wanted to get out there for people was like a little taste of a nice meditation with you, a little information on what meditation is. I think, hopefully any of our viewers might be interested to dive a little deeper. And I'm going to put your maybe your Instagram handle back up here, and certainly also the other links above, Rashmi's website, and also I think on your YouTube channel, do you have additional meditations there also?
I do. Thank you for mentioning that. I do. I actually have quite a few evidence-based meditations there that are completely free that anybody can try at any time.
Great. That's fantastic. Well, so I hope that's this has been helpful to any of you that have joined and get to know more about how a meditation practice can be helpful for just living life better, and how meditation, mindfulness, and breath work might be helpful for people to alleviate chronic pain. Rashmi, thank you so much for joining us today.
It has been my pleasure. Thank you.
All right, excellent. And this is Sarah Merritt signing off from Lifestream Health Center. Come call us at 301-860-0305 to schedule an appointment to see us in the office. Thank you.